Okay, let's do it together. Om Sahana Vavatu Sahano Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karavavahe Tejasvina Vadhitamastu Ma Vidvishawahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. So, the preceding week, would anyone like to glow and shine and share, if you will, what out of the 4 distortions of humans that we all face, including our 3 dharmas, samanya dharma, swadharma, loka sangraha, self-esteem, and the other 2. Would anyone like to share anything that was in particular interest or that was worthy of contemplating? Okay. So what is samanya dharma? Any hands? Samanya dharma?
Like social rules.
Yeah, okay. Samanya dharma is universal ethical values. So what is samanya dharma?
Universal ethical values.
This is a class, guys. I expect you to know this. Okay. Then we moved on to swadharma, which is any hands, any volunteers?
Individual.
Yes. So swadharma is your personal responsibilities and your personal duties. That is personal to every jiva. Okay. So what is swadharma?
Personal duties.
Okay. Good. Okay. And then loka sangraha is going beyond your swadharma and samanya dharma. Loka sangraha says, how can I think in terms of interconnectedness? That is, everything is the whole. So that means, for example, if I go to the ocean and my thinking is, I'm going to keep my community clean. That is called swadharma and samanya dharma. But if I say, I'm not going to pollute the ocean because I care and I am concerned about the whole world, if that is my natural thinking, that's called loka sangraha. So loka sangraha is expanding our view beyond our own little selfish or family or community that is thinking about the whole. Because this trains us to what? Understand ourselves as the whole. So therefore we have a metaphor of how to live according to Sarvam Brahmaha, and that is, you can start living it right here on earth by caring about the whole and having all your thoughts reflect that knowledge that nothing is separate here. That means if I swear or curse or insult somebody, then they could be scarred for life and they could have children, and that scar could in a subtle way pass on to them and their children, who will now give birth to new kids, and this just carries on through generations. So Loka Sangraha trains us to be concerned and care about the whole, because our usual way, and you shouldn't feel guilty about this because of our survival instinct, is to think just about ourselves or our family. So this is a way of how to live Loka Sangraha in a way that is conducive or reflective of one who is worthy of called a yogi. Like, for example, Ramana Maharshi or Gandhi or Nelson Mandela or Abraham Lincoln or any one of these, or even JF Kennedy, any one of these who have thought about the whole versus just their own nation or their own country, they are practicing Loka Sangraha. Okay. Then we moved on to emotional maturity, and we talked about 4 ways as to how to handle emotional upsets or emotional traumas or emotional distortions that arise per the triggers and the never-ending environmental circumstances showing up. And the 4 ways was through, firstly, acknowledge the emotion. Yes, I feel X. Yes, this is present. And then the second way was that we reframe whatever is being felt, look at it from a different angle. This is, actually we have all done reframing in one way or another. When somebody has done something to us and they came up and they explained why they did it, and they were honest about it, then we said, oh, I didn't know, I'm sorry. I thought you did that because of. So reframing is extremely powerful and immediate, and it trains us to utilize the maximum capacity of your brain, that is to look at it from a broader perspective versus just a very singularity, which we are based and trained based on our vasanas. Because vasanas are what? Vasanas are our tendencies to think in a way that reflects how we operate with the world. So therefore, loka sangraha and reframing causes us to what? Expand, to broaden our vision, and that trains the mind to think holistically, which is extremely important when it comes to self-inquiry, where the intellect, see how the intellect's yellow? Why is it yellow? Because it's sattvic. It means it's pure and it's clear. And the intellect has to be pure and clear in order to discriminate the real from the unreal. That's the whole point. Okay. Now, the third way was to write it out, because this causes us to... And there's a special power about writing, if you like writing. I don't know if you do, but when I got personally the iPad and the Apple Pencil, I just fell in love with writing. So maybe digital would work, maybe pen and paper, traditional will work. But either way, write it out. And then finally recognize that there are consistently these forces, these powers throughout, all pervasive, it's called sarvagatam, all pervasive, that are always acting and willing to help if only you ask, Ishvara or Bhagavan. So now we have introduced the word Ishvara and Bhagavan. I haven't explained what it means. I'm going to now explain what it means. Bhagavan, when I say Bhagavan or Ishvara, when I say Ishvara, I'm usually referring to both. But then I also say Ishvara too. When I say Ishvara too, I'm referring to everything underneath the line. The thing is, you cannot separate both of them, because there is only one, there is nothing stew here. So based on the context, I will say either Ishvara or Ishvara too, and you will understand what I mean by that. So what does Bhagavan mean? Bhagavan, for now, has 2 terms, or 2 definitions. One is sarvagatam. That means it's all pervasive. So, what does all pervasive mean? It means there is no place where Bhagavan is not. So, does here exclude sarvagatam, all pervasiveness? Does all pervasiveness exclude the Himalayan mountains in a cave? Does it exclude India? Does it exclude some holy place in your little ashram, your little corner in the meditation seat? So that means what? All pervasive, sarvagatam, means there is no place where Bhagavan is not. And the second term is nityam. Nityam means timeless. So, timeless means what? That means there is no time where Bhagavan is not. So, knowing that, does now exclude timeless? Because we said it's timeless. There's no time where Bhagavan is not. So does now exclude timeless? Does now exclude Bhagavan? Does here exclude Bhagavan? So that means what? Bhagavan, or Ishvara too, is here and now. Not somewhere in the Himalayan mountains or some temple, some ashram, or some different school, or even, it doesn't matter where, in the toilet, in the kitchen, on the seat, in the train, in the car, with another person. There is no place where Bhagavan is not. It's always here and now. So that means what? You can always ask the universe for the help, because there is no place where Bhagavan is not at no time. So utilize that understanding. Okay. And then we moved on to self-esteem, and we talked about inferiority complex. And there's many reasons for the inferiority complex. The biggest one is the swadharma, which means what? Swadharma means what?
Personal duties and responsibilities.
Excellent. Because the personal duties and responsibilities are being violated. In other words, one is not doing what they're supposed to be doing. So what does that mean? They're going about per their own vasanas, per their own raga, dvesha, or attractions and repulsions. So now you can understand why it's necessary to neutralize our vasanas, because our vasanas cause us to what? Innocently not fulfill or progress as we should with our swadharma, which causes a violation of samanya dharma, which causes low self-esteem, and low self-esteem causes me to further think I cannot do this, and in turn I do not even show up at the classes because I think I'm not worthy enough. So you can see how it's all tied together. So that means self-esteem is a part to address by, number one, simply asking a question. If you were to ask for an instruction, and that would be, am I doing the best right now? Am I giving my best right now? In a conversation with a person, am I doing the best I can? It's a very easy thing to trick ourselves, because we're talking or we're listening to someone and we're elsewhere. We're not fully present with them. And what is Bhagavan? Here and now. You're talking to Bhagavan and we're not paying attention to Bhagavan while we're expecting moksha. When Bhagavan is the one that gives us moksha. So that means there is no avoidance here, because then we are avoiding that power which is going to, which we're using or utilizing to understand and discriminate the real from the unreal, which is our intellect. Yeah? And finally, we talked about the conclusions of the world, and the simple solution was to expand our narrow-minded view, because what happens is the mind by default, due to our tamas and rajas, our veiling power and our projecting power, we'll get into the three gunas, what it does is because the veil, when there's a veil over the intellect, so see how the intellect's yellow? That's a pure, healthy intellect. But what happens is, if the intellect's not exercised and the intellect's covered with tamas means veiling, and rajas is that desire that causes us to do. So therefore we end up doing, but also not even knowing what we're doing, because we don't have the clarity to understand the actions or what's causing us to be veiled. So that means purify the mind, and therefore you will start to see how the mind, by the virtue of its purity, can have a broader perspective about the world, which doesn't exclude loka sangraha, because we just talked about the totality of the world. So loka sangraha is very much connected with the view of the broader, that is, how am I helping, or what is also being done good versus what's bad. We turn on the TV, it's all bad. It's just, generally negative news. But there's also a lot of good stuff that we never get to see. And yet it far outweighs the negative, in truth. So that's what conclusion about the world and people is. And also about people, we need to settle our accounts consistently with whomever we have grudges or certain views that diminish them or make them lower than our mom or dad or partner or spouse. As we get into the Bhagavad Gita, you will see that the wise see no difference between one or the other. Why? Because it's just all love. It's just all me. That's what non-dual means. Okay. So you can see how we're giving you, hi guys, the metaphors, how to live in the world that reflects the natural qualities that the wise people, the wise person by nature sees the world. Okay, any questions about that?
So if you view someone as superior, well, that's a self-esteem thing. Viewing people as lower, but we tend to view people who have more knowledge, more skill, more power, more resources, or more authority.
Yeah. In other words, just do the best you can. Because it's hard to tell whether am I reducing someone or not. Am I inflating them or reducing them? So it's good to ask, how would I see them if they were my brother or my sister? Would I do this to them if they were my family member? Probably not. So, and that's the thing that we do in the societies. We put different masks, different authority masks with different people. And the whole point is to see everyone equal. Because that's what a wise person is. We see everyone as you, as consciousness. There is no difference between anyone. Okay. So that summarizes the preceding session last week. All right. Oops. All right, let's summarize just quickly what samsara is. Okay, before we move on to the scripture. So what is samsara? Any volunteers? Samsara. Okay. Samsara generally means, to put into a practical aspect, believing what changes is real. Which results in what? Always wanting to modify the experience. Isn't that what we're doing today? We're always modifying the experience. In other words, we're always changing the environment we're in. We're changing our friends. We're changing. We want to go somewhere. We want to change the. We want to have novelty. We want to have something new, something fresh, something exciting. In other words, never. What does that imply in a subtle way? I'm not happy with what I have. Why would I want to change things if I'm completely happy? If you're completely, utterly, totally happy, would you have any need or desire to change things? You won't have any desire to change yourself, the environment, or anyone around you because you're just happy. But what do? We want to change things. And we want to change what? We want to change the changing. In other words, the whole world is changing all the time. Our relationships with people are changing, even with ourselves, with our own minds and intellect. It's changing with what? The weather's changing. The knowledge, how much you know is changing. How much you don't know is changing. Emotions are changing. What I feel is changing. What I know is changing. What I don't know is changing. What is not changing? What is not changing is the self. Okay. But a samsari is one who is consistently drawing all attention onto the changing. Thoughts, doubts, emotions, feelings, friends, this, that, you name it. It's all changing. And that's what a samsari is. One who puts all of their attention on the changing at the complete neglect of the unchanging, which is what we're all seeking, the unchanging. Because that's where the stability is, that which never changes. How can you rest in something that's constantly changing? How can you find peace or happiness in something that's constantly changing? Which what? If I do, it what implies simultaneous fear, because there's a part of us that knows this is not going to last, because it's going to change. All right. So, samsara is the misunderstanding that I am already whole and complete. So therefore, I have a need to change my experience in the hopes to fulfill or complete my sense of incompleteness. That's why most of us go into a relationship. We need something within us that's empty. So we think jumping into a relationship with whomever it is, that it's going to fill that void. But how long does that last? Okay. So samsara is caused by two major principles. We talked about raga, dvesha. Raga is your attractions and your dvesha is the repulsions. So this is what the attachments lie under, the category of situations, people, ideas, thoughts, whatever it is. So here's a question. Have you ever thought that you were right? Yeah. We all have, right? So why is that? Why do we think and then justify our thoughts? Because of our attachments. That's samsara. What happens is the I, the self, the thought of whatever is occurring in the moment gets superimposed over the I, and because the person is not discriminating between the real and the unreal, that's what the intellect does, discriminates the real, satya, from the unreal, mithya. Because the intellect hasn't been doing that and hasn't practiced that, what happens is the thought gets mixed with the what? Consciousness. And then the I thinks it's my thought. Yeah, okay. So, the second part of samsara is shoka, which is your mental disturbance. And the mental disturbance is caused mainly by expectations. So here's the thing with expectations. What do we usually expect? We expect things to turn out in a certain way, don't we? Like, I expect this person to kiss me in a certain way. I expect for a certain colleague to come up to me and say something. I expect someone to forgive me. I expect certain food to taste in such a way. I expect for me to have a certain amount of standards about myself. So we have nothing but expectations. And where are expectations coming from? Vasanas. Likes and dislikes. What else is an expectation other than your like and dislike? Would you have an expectation if you didn't have likes and dislikes? No, that's what an expectation is. I have a like, therefore I expect certain things to turn out according to my like. I have a dislike, and therefore if the dislike does occur, that's not how I expected it because my like is otherwise, and therefore what? Then there's an emotional situation. So that means this all flows back into our vasanas, our tendencies, our likes and dislikes, which need to be neutralized. And as we get soon into karma yoga, we will discuss how to actually neutralize our vasanas. Okay. Samsara. Samsara is, let's read a little bit. Samsara is believing that your thoughts, world, and experiences are real. Samsara is lack of understanding that I am whole and complete. So part of you that changes will change, which is the subtle body, the mind, the intellect, and the ego. But that part is not real. So the part of us that changes constantly is the subtle body, the mind, the intellect, and so all changes happen in the subtle body. Did you ever get a phone call and your friend says, I'm going through a lot of changes? Yeah, you probably did the same thing, didn't you? I did the same thing. I'm going through a lot of changes. Who's going through a lot of changes? not I. Consciousness doesn't. What is Bhagavan? Sarvagatam, all pervasive. It never has or undergoes any modifications or changes. Only the subtle body undergoes changes of whatever sort they happen to be. So therefore, that's how we give ourselves away when we say, I am going through a lot of changes. No, you're not. Your subtle body is going through a lot of changes. Your mind, your intellect. And tomorrow, you won't even agree what you said yesterday, because then you'll see it from a different perspective, which is just a mind-intellect process. So therefore, you automatically negate yesterday's opinion. But then why did you believe yesterday's opinion so strongly, and yet today you disagree with it? That's called samsara. Always believing and putting all of our focus, our attention into what is occurring in the moment, believing as if it's real, completely neglecting or negating the principle because of which that which changes is known to be for what it is. The principle because of which the changes are known to be for what they are. That's the self. Okay. So the part of you that changes will change. And samsari believes that what changes is real, while a wise person knows what changes is not who I am. A wise person knows what changes is the subtle body, your mind and the intellect, but not you. Consciousness, awareness of the changes. That doesn't change. Okay. So we're habituated to think that what's happening to us is happening to us. That's a common experience. What's happening to me is happening to me. That's just our habit, how we think. And yet we need to start to what? Objectify what's happening to me is happening to my what? My subtle body, not to me. That's why Vedanta is called the yoga of objectivity. You're starting to objectify the body, the thoughts, the feelings, the emotions, the doubts. Everything is objectified because it's what? It's known to you. Therefore, it cannot be you because you know about what is being presented to you. Okay. All right, so we stopped at willingness to be taught is necessary. So these were the 4 concepts, 4 stages of enlightenment. So willingness to be taught is necessary. You guys already been here for a couple of sessions, so I would assume that you've got willingness to be taught. So that's a qualifier. Okay, so what happened is Arjuna, as we remember, was standing between the 2 armies, the Pandavas and the Kauravas. And Arjuna was full of high hopes and very effervescent and joyful. And when he came to the center to get a perspective of the 2 armies, he realized that Bhishma and Drona, the 2 teachers, were on the other side. And he looked into them and everyone else, and he realized what's about to happen, that a huge massacre is about to occur. And because of that, Arjuna lost his ground, his center, and he became emotional. That's why it says, to give in to your emotions does not help you. That's what Krishna said to Arjuna when Krishna saw Arjuna weeping. Now, Krishna tried to explain to Arjuna why this is not helping. And this is what Krishna said. Standing in a no man's land between 2 armies, Krishna, as if smiling, said, although you speak words of wisdom, you grieve for those who are not worthy of grief. Okay. Now, why does it say as if smiling? That's a little code in the Gita, as if smiling. The reason is Krishna, as we now know, is the total, is speaking as the total, which is all what? Sarvagatam, all pervasive. Krishna has already seen this before, infinite times. So he's telling Arjuna, don't worry, it's fine. But he didn't want to smile because he didn't want to offend or insult Arjuna. In other words, as if smiling means what? Oh boy, here we go again. This has happened before infinite amount of times. Here we go again. But he didn't want to let Arjuna know this. Yeah. Although you speak words of wisdom, you grieve for those who are not worthy of grief. So, what happened is, Arjuna was, of course, now sat in his charioteer, and he was disappointed and disheartened, and hopes high went into hopes low, and he started to tell Krishna in order to justify his emotions. And this is what happens when we're emotional. That means when the mind, remember the mind is the emotions, when the mind supersedes the intellect, what happens? Then the intellect ends up bidding the minds. That means it ends up giving reasons and justifications why I feel the way I feel and why it's right to feel the way I feel. This is very common. When we get emotional, then what happens? When it's overpowering, then the intellect ends up justifying and rationalizing the emotion why it's actually okay to feel that way. And that is not the right use of... You see how we have a mind, intellect, and ego? How the intellect is on top? That's an attribute of a healthy, developed person. That means their intellect guides the emotions instead of the emotions guiding the intellect. Because if the emotions guide the intellect, then what? Where's the discriminating power? How can you think? How can you rationalize? How can you do, quote, loka sangraha? How can you do the best that you can if you're overpowered by emotions? There's no way. So therefore, it comes back to the same story. Exercise the intellect. But in this moment, Arjuna couldn't have his intellect come in because he was overpowered by the emotion of these two teachers. Now, Krishna says, wise people do not grieve for the living or for the dead. Now, what other option is there? You're either dead or you're living, right? And it says, wise people, that means a jnani, enlightened one, does not grieve for the living or for the dead. Why would Krishna say that? And what does Krishna mean by this? Okay, so Arjuna obviously believes he is the body, she is the body and the mind. And everyone else is the body and the mind. This is a common samsari thought. I am the body, I am the mind. But Krishna is speaking from a much greater depth. He says, wise people do not grieve for the living, which is me, or for the dead, which is also me. What? Just an appearance. In other words, an appearance of Maya. And a samsari takes that to be real, and then what? Emotions, as if it's real, start to pour. But Krishna is saying, they do not grieve for the living or for the dead. Why? Because a wise person knows there is no difference between a cockroach or another person, or this curtain, or the sun, or the moon. Because it's all what? It's all me. Consciousness in the form of the appearance generated by Maya. So, Arjuna doesn't understand this, and we will start to see how Krishna starts to expand on this teaching. You and I and all these kings have always existed. We will exist forever. So you can see how Krishna is now bringing in the teaching. He's actually starting to talk what the self is. The self-awareness, self-existence. So he's saying that, so Arjuna doesn't understand this. Arjuna thinks there is a beginning, there is a middle, and there is an ending. In other words, there's a birth of the body. If you believe you're the body, for you, for the samsara, it will be I am born, I last, there's a sustenance to it, and there is a death. And that's all there is to it. But now Krishna says, you and I and all these kings, both the Pandavas and the Kauravas and Arjuna, have always existed. We will exist forever. So obviously, Krishna cannot be talking about a human body, a physical body. Krishna is talking about what? The self, yeah. But Arjuna at this point does not understand that. Okay. Where are we? Okay. Even when you consider that the indwelling jiva, or just an indweller, or hatment it's called, but just an indweller, individual is born, lives, dies, and gains another body, is there any cause for grief? So, now Krishna is trying to soothe Arjuna's emotion and say that, look, Arjuna, when I say Arjuna, Arjuna simply means a seeker, one that's not fully convinced that Sarvam Brahmaha, that I am the whole. That's what Arjuna means. It doesn't matter whether I say he or she, I'm referring to both sexes. So Arjuna believes, like I said, that there's a beginning and then an end. But Krishna says, don't worry, because even if you die and you don't get this knowledge or assimilate this knowledge, self-knowledge I'm talking about, completely, it doesn't matter, because you'll get another body and you'll get another chance to relearn, to understand Sarvam Brahmaha, I am the whole. Okay. So obviously Krishna is talking about, he's bringing, see, Arjuna is looking at it from a mithya point of view, Maya. In other words, apparent reality. But Krishna is bringing in the teaching, which is given away in the always existed and will exist forever, is giving away the Satya. So this is where now Krishna begins to teach us what is Satya. Okay. Sense perceptions give rise to ever-changing sensations of pleasure and pain when they contact sense objects. You have no choice but to endure them. Okay, so here what Krishna is saying is, Krishna is introducing the mind and the intellect, the subtle body, which I said what? Is where experience happens. So now Krishna is slowly telling Arjuna that because Arjuna is exposed to this environment, he's in an existential crisis. Arjuna doesn't know whether I should go or whether I should stay or I should run away. That's a common human dilemma. We don't know what to do. And Krishna is saying, Arjuna, you are always exposed to the world. And the world is nothing but what? Experiences or objects, which are being picked up or being input through the five senses, ears, skin, eyes, tongue, so on. And therefore, you have no choice but to experience the world all the time. This is true in your experience. You're always experiencing, right? Why? Because you have a body, and that body is always receiving stimulus data, and therefore it's what being picked up by the mind and intellect, interpreted according to the vasanas, and you're having an experience according to that mechanism. So Krishna is saying to Arjuna, it is trying to get Arjuna out of this emotional problem by saying, Arjuna, you're acting or you're being like this because you're simply exposed to the environment, which is what? Causing this kind of an emotional response. That's a fair statement. Okay. In other words, how does this apply to us? It means that no matter what or how much you know, there will always be what? Some data entering, and therefore experiencing will continue. So on day one I said moksha is freedom from experience. This does not mean that experience does not occur. It means that experience still continues like for anyone else, except the experience is known to be what? Occurring in the subtle body, but not to me. Why? Because of the discriminating principle working consistently and therefore not mixing the I with the what? The experience that's occurring in any moment. Okay. So now we're bringing in the teaching of the subtle body, which Arjuna is, of course, not knowledgeable about. And only a discriminating person who sees pleasure and pain equally is fit for liberation. This is the most important qualification for moksha. So if you're after moksha and you've done yourself with the dharma, that is responsibilities of the world, artha, wealth, and kama, pleasure, and you're ready for moksha, this is the primary qualification. Only a discriminating person, and where does the discrimination happen? In the intellect. Only a discriminating person who sees pleasure and pain equally is fit for liberation. So that means what? What is a samsari? A samsari is I want, or I like, or I don't like. In other words, a samsari is one who what prefers pleasure and avoids pain. This is your Tony Robbins, this is what he says. We always go for pleasure and we do whatever it is to avoid pain. This is your common self-help world. And yet here it says a person who sees no difference between either, only that one is fit for liberation. Why? Because if I have certain likes and dislikes, which is vasanas, then what? I'm going to be predisposed towards certain ways at the expense of neglecting the other. So that means I could, for example, go to one school, right, of thought, because I don't like the other school. But the other school is actually what I need in order to spiritually grow. But I'm never going to get to the other school because I have preferences about a particular philosophy. So therefore, our vasanas restrict us from understanding the whole because we're always biased one side over the other, one side at the expense of the other. Clear?
So, if we're challenged by a teaching, it's probably a good thing.
It is, yeah.
Is it necessary that that's the case? So,
yeah, there's in Vedanta we say it's kind of a big statement, but it says that the students never write in Vedanta because we're teaching you straight from the Upanishads, and if you want to be right, that's fine. But you just got to understand that you're actually up against hundreds and hundreds of rishis through thousands of years who have put this work together, and it's undisputable due to the common experience of all enlightened sages. So also the other reason is for not understanding the qualification is the intellect is too tamasic or rajasic. It's too veiled or there's too much erratic movement in the mind, and that's causing one to be constantly looking for novelty in life, for something new, something novel. So that's why we're going to get into karma yoga, which is going to neutralize those two factors and cause the mind to be a pure reflective mirror. What I've noticed actually in schools in Vedanta is the ones that really get this quickly are the ones that just kind of have a naive trust, kind of like gullible. I'm one of those. I'm just so gullible. I just eat it all up. So I just came to my teacher and I was like, I've got nothing to lose, so I'm just going to listen. But there's other ones who are questioning constantly, is this right? Could this be true? And, how can this compare to something else? And we get these all the time. They're trying to fit Vedanta into some other model. And you cannot do that because Vedanta is an independent means of knowledge. It doesn't depend on anything else. And we discussed this, how you can prove this in the previous session through testing yourself through rational logic. Okay. So my teacher James has this, he coined this phrase called a zero-sum game. Zero-sum game means that you got to understand, this is part of your qualification. Whatever you gain in the world, samsara, there is always an unseen loss. In other words, whenever I gain 1 point, I think I scored a relationship, right? It's all good. I've got the woman. Well, what happens is there's a -1 point which I do not see sometime in the future. Because as soon as we get into a relationship, what happens? Instantly, stress or anxiety kicks in, because now what? They could leave me. Now I have to maintain what I got. In other words, I won, but I lost. 0. Or, for example, let's say let's say you get into health, like a health program, and you become really pretty and, you know, glamorous, and everyone thinks you're just amazing. But now what happens? We have to what? Maintain that image. In other words, now we have work to do in order to maintain the good opinion about ourselves, which has been established through our initial idea of what it's like to be somebody or someone. So in other words, there's no winning in Mithya. And that's the primary qualification, actually. It's a very important point, because we think that we can just kind of, you know, do Vedanta or study Vedanta, but then, you know, still have so many likes and dislikes out there. No, when you come to Vedanta, your likes and dislikes are going to start neutralizing. That's the only way to this. Because there is no half-half. You're either in or you're out. That's why it's a serious qualification, and we're not kidding you. You know, it's the final stage, and the final stage isn't easy. It's not going to be easy at all. We're going to put it right up now. It's hard. It's very hard, because the best of what life has to offer, that you're probably going to have to let go. But a lot of us cannot do that, because all of our what? Happiness and joy depends on one thing or another in what? Samsara. Either relationship, our children, our business, the money that we've accumulated, our status, our image, our physical beauty, our physical strength. We are dependent on one thing or another, and or we have a certain privilege. Those things have to be released little by little. And that's going to be done through karma yoga, little by little. Otherwise, these likes and dislikes are what? Causing me to feel separate. As long as I have likes and dislikes apart from the world, it implies what? I am separate from the world. Does Sarvagatam hold up to that kind of attitude, that which is pervasive? It does not. Because Sarvagatam, I am, the whole, means what? There is no difference between what? Being here, doing this, or being over there, doing that. It's all the same. But what is a samsari? Samsari is all about being here and not being there, or being there and not being here. In other words, rejecting reality, half of it, at the preference of the other. So you can see how the qualifications are quite high. Okay, so the only way, quote, out of samsara is through moksha. That's the only way out. So that means there is no happiness, there's no lasting happiness in the world. There is a lot of happiness here. There's a lot of beautiful rainfall, rainbow. You can fall in love. You can do it over and over again. It's all fine. We understand that. There's nice chocolates, tiramisu, and all these nice pleasures of life. You know, take a ship and just get lost with someone, or whatever it is that you consider a good life. So that is available, but you got to understand that it doesn't last. And what we're all inherently seeking is lasting, permanent satisfaction, happiness. That's what moksha means. That means there is no additional happiness in the world that can add anything onto me, because I'm already whole and complete. And I ask the question, put your hand up, I'm going to ask it again, if you want to be whole and complete. Whole and complete, yeah. Okay, put your hand up. Who wants to be incomplete and partial? Something sounds off about that, doesn't it? Okay, well, here's the question. if I get into, if I have a really nice life, a nice relationship and business, and it's all flowing, how long is that exact joy going to last? It's going to last for a certain moment, but it's going to change based on someone, a bad customer, or my own thoughts change about the business or the partner I'm with. So everything's changing. So that means what? There is no dependence. There is no guarantee. There is no safety net in Mithya. Qualifications. And non-dual epiphanies, these are all our, we have all received non-dual epiphanies. We've had these oneness experiences, and some of us have probably had samadhis and plant experiences, and whatever it is. All of these are also in Mithya. They're just high levels of Mithya, Maya. And they're very helpful because they can guide us and can kind of give us, some idea what's it like. But the problem is they don't last. And not only that, but they're another Maya-generated experience. In other words, it has nothing to do with consciousness. It's just a really nice state, like Nirvikalpa Samadhi, total absence of thoughts. That's what the yogis are attaining in the Himalayas. They're all about, they call enlightenment Nirvikalpa Samadhi. I spoke to one of them and I said, no, it's not. It's just knowing yourself as yourself. And he said, he totally lost it. He was like, no, it's not. It's Nirvikalpa Samadhi. I just didn't argue. You can't get across to them like that. So there's this huge belief what moksha is, and we make it very clear what moksha is. Knowing the difference between the real and the unreal. Knowing the difference between you and not you. Atma, anatma. Self, non-self. Okay. What is unreal doesn't exist. And what is real never ceases to exist. Okay, so what does this mean? Well, let's start with the latest statement. What is real never ceases to exist. What is real? You. You're real. Everything other than you is unreal, including Vedanta, including this guy sitting here, including everyone else. Only you alone are real. There's only one of us here, appearing as many through the power of Maya. We'll discuss how it creates apparent appearance, and then we see everyone as different. So when I say you, what does that mean?
Awareness.
Yeah, which you are. So moksha means discriminating that awareness as and understanding what awareness is not. That means understanding what awareness is and understanding what awareness is not. That's the preliminary stage. That's the discrimination. In the later stage of this course, we will understand that there's actually no difference between me or you, or Atma, Anatma, or self and no self. Because discrimination is another what? It's another duality. So we start as a preliminary discrimination at the beginning. Okay. So the essence, okay, actually we haven't covered. What is unreal doesn't exist. So what does this mean? We just said only you are real. And he says what is unreal doesn't exist. So it doesn't mean that the world doesn't exist. Because you can feel, you can experience. Whatever you can experience exists. Just to, in case any Tony Parson people here who says nothing exists. Okay, so it just simply means it's an appearance of you in another form. But because it's an appearance and it doesn't last, it's as good as saying it's non-existent. Because if I show you a pen, okay, here's a pen, we're all watching it, where is it now? But what has stayed? You. Awareness. Okay, let's do another little example. Imagine done this already before with our later session. Imagine a gray elephant. Imagine a gray elephant. Okay? Now imagine a pink duck. Okay, stop. Where is the gray elephant now? Gone. No more. Where's the pink duck? Gone. No more. Are you still here? Are you still completely present, alert, aware? So that means what? There was a thought, in this case it's a subtle thought, it appeared, and in real life, this, for example, an elephant could be just a drama, a relationship drama, and we get what? We get so invested and we talk about it, we share it to our friends, we gossip about it, we try to go to a therapy about it, we try to go into NLP, neural hypnosis and all these other releasing methods, energy treatment about it, and then what happens? Gone. And then another thing comes, and then we repeat the same thing. Gone. That's called samsara. We spend our whole lives trying to fix something that was just an appearance, completely neglecting the one that has stayed and saw both the gray elephant appear, stay and disappear, and also saw the pink duck. Was it a duck? It was a duck. Be born, have sustenance, and have death. And who's the one that remains? You, that which is real. So now, how does this apply to, because I said duck and elephant, and you think, well, okay, what about this? There's no difference between your inner thoughts and your outer thoughts. They're the same thing. They're thoughts. One is a subtle thought, and the other is a gross thought, a more physical thought. But they're still thoughts, and they all come and go. In a couple of minutes, this satsang is going to be finished. And what do we say? Whatever doesn't last is what? Unreal. Even knowledge, this Vedanta knowledge, is this knowledge going to last in a couple of minutes? No. So even Vedanta is unreal. What's real? You. The one that is always completely alert, present, witnessing all of these changes. The gray elephant, the pink ducks, all of your friends come and go, all of your experiences come and go, all of your thoughts come and go, and yet you remain completely alert, present, and alive to witness all of them. That's how you're able to report about all these experiences, because you were always there, and everything else came and went. So how does it make sense to spend our whole lives getting involved and gossiping and talking about what comes and goes, knowing it's going to come and go? So that's what doesn't exist means. Okay. The essence of both is known by the wise. That means the wise know the essence of, quote, what doesn't exist and what never ceases to exist, which is you. And that's what we're talking about. Moksha is knowing the difference between the real and the unreal. The changing versus the changeless. Okay. No one can destroy that which pervades everything. So what does this mean? Okay, here's a little experiment. True or false? This is a question. If you go to the farthest reaches of the universe. Now, let's not philosophize whether there's a universe or not. It doesn't matter. Just take the question literally. If you go to the farthest reaches of the universe and there is nothing there, nothing, is that true or false?
You're there.
Yes.
Who said that? Yeah, that's right. You're there. That's how you know that there was nothing there, because you were there. So that means what? that statement, wherever I go, there I am. That's what it means. That's what it's pointing to. Wherever I go, wherever the attention is awareness, that's exactly where I am. That means it's what? All pervasive. That's why it says, you cannot destroy that which pervades everything. You cannot destroy yourself. You can destroy everything else that appears in the self, all your experiences, that is, but you cannot destroy that principle because of which the changes or appearances are known to be for what they are. Okay. The bodies that appear in the self, not the self that appears in the body, that means what? The body that you own right now, sitting down on the sofa, on the chair, that body is what? In you. You're not in the body is in you. The bodies that appear in the self, which is not subject to objectification. In other words, okay, this is the most important statement. The self cannot be objectified. That means, we made this very early on, because what happens in the yoga world or the experiential enlightenment is people try to experience the self. They have this idea what it's like. And they think the self is some object apart from me, and it's my job through my sadhana, through my practice, by the act of it, to one day, another future event, right? To one day, through the practice of it, I'm going to merge with the self. So there's two problems in this thinking. First of all, it implies what? Time. That means it's a future event. And second of all, it implies what? That I am not already that. And how am I going to know when I've reached that if I don't know what that is? How is that going to work? I'm trying to reach the self, but I don't know what the self is, but I have hopes that one day when I reach the self, I'm going to what? Know what the self is. How am I going to know what the self is if I don't know what the self is? It's an endless cycle. And people get stuck in this world of trying to attain or become the self when you already are the self. There's only the self. There's only you here. So we're making this clear from the start that if you get caught in this trap of trying to experience the self, that is a common mistake. You are always experiencing yourself. Are you experiencing yourself right now? Are you going to be experiencing yourself when you're back on the train? Yeah. Are you going to be experiencing yourself when you're in a car having a traffic jam? In other words, what? The self is always experiencing itself in the form of the appearance that it's taking on at any one moment. In this case, the self is experiencing the self sitting down listening to a satsang. And then out there, the self is going to be experiencing the self in a form of what? The body experiencing the cold on its skin from the weather. And then the self is going to be experiencing itself while what? While it's dreaming. And then the self experiences itself while what? It's in deep sleep. And then the self experiences itself having ignorance about who it is. And then the self experiences itself having knowledge about who it is. In other words, what? Knowledge, ignorance, experience has nothing to do with you. You are the knower of the knowledge. You are the knower of the ignorance. You are the knower of the experience. How would you know that you're ignorant unless you know that you're ignorant? You know, people say, I'm ignorant, I don't know who I am. How can you even say that? Does that not imply you have to first know that there is a not knowing? In other words, what? The self is that which precedes both ignorance and knowledge. That self I am. That self you are. Consciousness. Okay. No one can destroy which pervades. So the bodies that appear in the self which is not subject to objectification. Now we know what that means, right? You can never become, you already are it. Begin and end anyway. So Krishna is saying that, is trying to reassure Arjuna that, because Arjuna is concerned, he doesn't want to fight, and Krishna is just saying, don't worry, the body is going to, pass anyway, so what's the problem? And then he tries to add a little bit more sympathy or support by saying, death is certain for that which is born, and birth is inevitable for that which is dead. In other words, as soon as you're born, you're actually dead already. It's almost like a check out here. You check in a hotel here on Earth, and you check out. It's quick, huh? You go through all these experiences, and then what? You find yourself, oh my God, I'm 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, dead. So in other words, what's the point of trying to be concerned about your physical death when it's already happened, technically? It's already done. It's already finished. So that's what Krishna is explaining to Arjuna, who is not getting it at this point. Okay. That is okay. Just as a person throws away old clothes and puts on new ones, the self dwelling within the body discards old bodies and enters new ones. Why do you believe you're a person? Is there any proof you're a person? There's no proof. We're just being told you're a person, and we just assume I'm a person. What proof do you have that you're a person? So what happens is, the mind, the three bodies, the gross body, subtle body, and the causal body, they get superimposed onto the self. Now the self is what? Consciousness. There is no there's no levels of, that's a common mistake in the spiritual world, levels of consciousness. There is just one consciousness, which is just conscious. So what happens is, when the three bodies, called the jiva means sentient entity, that includes both animals and plants. Animals and plants are also jivas. In this case, we're talking about the human jiva. When the three bodies, that is the human jiva, gets superimposed over the self, because of the content of the three bodies take on life in the form of that content. But it takes on life how and why? Because why? The original light, awareness, is shining on the three bodies, the jiva. So therefore, awareness is always the same, but when awareness shines onto jiva A, then the jiva goes, oh, this is me. Onto jiva B, then jiva B goes, oh, this is me, and we are different. And yet what? What's the essential nature of all jivas, of all of us? Consciousness. So when consciousness takes on a certain body, a reiteration, then the body assumes, I am this body, I am this mind, I am this thought, I am this feeling, I am this emotion. Because now they're so intimately connected, the mind, intellect, and the consciousness, that the jiva cannot tell them apart, because they're like this. They're inseparable. So then the natural assumption is, therefore I must be this person. So what are we doing in Vedanta? We're separating them. So you can see that you are apart from your body and your mind, which has nothing to do with you, consciousness. But a samsari is the one who doesn't know this. They think that the thought and the feeling and the doubt belongs to me, because the body and the mind are superimposed over the self, and then I cannot tell the difference apart from them. Okay. Just as a person throws away old clothes, and we read that. Is that clear? Just as a person, in other words, you get new bodies. When I say you, consciousness takes on new bodies. all beings are unmanifest before birth. In other words, all beings are in the seed state, in the causal body. This is what happens after death. The subtle body and the causal body survive. The gross body obviously dies. But the subtle body, just like in your deep sleep, goes where? Back into the causal body. That's why there is nothing in deep sleep. Because there is no mind and intellect to know about any content. You cannot say, I am now in deep sleep. Why? Because there is no mind and intellect to say that. So after death, after physical death, the subtle body goes back into the seed state, into the causal body, and that's what it's referring to. All beings are unmanifest before birth, but then, due to not realizing my nature, they become manifest while living. In other words, the circumstances which cause birth are from your vasanas. That is from the previous predispositions of the previous life. And the previous vasanas determine your parents, determine what country you're born in, what situation you're born in, what culture, what creed, what kind of environment you're going to be held in. So that means that we're all born, bodies are all born based on the circumstances of the work or the unfinished work from, quote, the previous birth. Okay, so they're manifest while living and return to an unmanifest condition after death, only to become manifest again. So that means there's a manifest state and there's an unmanifest state. And there's an unmanifest state goes back into the manifest state. And this happens eternally. It's just that simple. Just like when you go to sleep, you close your eyes, the dream starts, and then the deep sleep starts, and then there's just nothing there. That's the unmanifest state. And then out of the deep sleep comes what? Back into the manifestation. And this is just a constant. So in other words, it's a microcosmic metaphor for the macrocosmic picture. That's how we can tell. We can also infer by the nature of how it happens in the microcosm. We can infer what is, because there's only one here. There's no out there which is different than here, because there's only here. So in other words, whatever is here is also here, because there is no there, it's all here. In other words, the microcosm and the macrocosm are equivalent. Okay. So get up and fight. So that's what Krishna is saying to Arjuna. Okay. And session 2, we can begin next week, because it will have a teaching of its own. So we can open for questions in regards, because what we're doing now is we're beginning the teachings of the self, and I want to make sure that everyone's on the same page, everyone's clear what we talked about so far. If any questions arise, do ask.
Yeah. So, with each life, is it trying to get you to a stage of enlightenment? Is that why karma happens? Is to try and steer you towards enlightenment and learn all the things you need to learn?
Okay, so this is a question of why birth occurs.
Sort of why are you taken on a path? Why are you born into a situation
Right.
to learn specific things?
Sure. Okay. Well, okay. Let's give you an example. Let's say that previous lifetime I was clear. Let's say you have a clear mind in a previous lifetime. So that means the next lifetime, Ishwara is going to put you in a circumstance based on two circumstances actually. Number one is Ishwara puts you, causes you to take on a swadharma that suits the needs of the total. That means if the world needs more accountants or more politicians, then Ishvara is going to put me in a family that's going to what? Influence me to according to the predisposition of either a politician or a philosopher, which are both what? Sattvic minds. They both have clear minds. I don't know about a politician, but I know a philosopher. Or the politician is more like rajasti, they're more like active, right? Okay, a lawyer and a philosopher. So if Ishvara needs more philosophers or lawyers, and my last life predisposition was a pure sattvic mind, then the next life I will be born into a family or circumstances according to which will influence the jiva to either become the whatever Ishvara needs in the moment, either a philosopher or a lawyer. Or, let's give you another example. If last life I did not learn how to forgive, I had a lot of anger or hatred towards people, and I hold grudges towards them, or I diminished them. What happens is Ishvara is going to put me in a situation that is going to cause me to resolve that unfinished business. In other words, Ishvara is going to put me in a family, either, could be two things, either one where parents are very forgiving, right? In other words, they're going to teach me, influence me how to forgive, or a situation where forgiveness is very hard. In which way I have to get another chance at discovering how to forgive. So what's the summary of this? Ishvara is the one who animates, the one who moves, the one who chooses, not me. Because there's only one Ishvara here. And how does Ishvara, quote, think? According to the needs of the total. That's how Ishvara chooses. Ishvara 2 now. That's how it chooses what, when, how, why. According to the needs of the total. So let's give you an example. Let's say that this half is for Manchester United, right? We're in a World Cup team. And this half is for, what's the Brazilian team called? The Brazilian guys. Okay, so this side wants their team to win, and this side wants their team to win. Now, considering that Ishvara is everything, how is now Ishvara supposed to choose which side wins? Because if Ishvara chooses this side, it means what? It's judging that side. And that's not Ishvara, that's a jiva. If Ishvara chooses that side, that means what? Ishvara has to see this side as lower. So therefore, Ishvara chooses according to the needs of the total. That's how we know which team's going to win. There's no other way, is there? So that means what? The entire world is nothing but a reflection of what needs to happen right now, including World War II, World War I. You think that was a bad event? Not at all. That's exactly what the world needed in order to move on, to progress. How about 9/11? That's exactly what the world needed to progress. Because it is all Ishvara. But at the same time, it's the jiva. Because Ishvara, now we're going to a little bit deeper topic. Ishvara is pure sattva. Ishvara is not, it is rajas and tamas, but out of sattva comes rajas and tamas. So Ishvara is just purity, pure sattva. It's only when a jiva comes that a jiva is quote, contaminated by the 3 gunas, which is what causes the evil in the world. So I'm saying this so we don't think that now Ishvara is the evil one. Ishvara is not the evil one. It's only when jiva comes with its contamination of the 3 gunas and its power of, quote, free will, that it's able to what? Choose according to its raga dvesha, that is, its attractions and repulsions. That means if I don't like someone and I don't like them enough, then what? I'm going to take a gun and then shoot them. Why? Because I have likes and dislikes. So that's the danger of carrying likes and dislikes, is it causes this endless cycle of birth and rebirth. And as you said, Ishwara is going to keep putting me in a situation that's going to resolve the like and dislike until what? That predisposition has evaporated, so that I can move on spiritually, I can move on, progress, evolve as a human being. We're going to get deeper into how about Ishwara. That's actually part 2, what Ishwara is, Ishwara 2, and also the gunas and also the karma, and all about the details as to how Ishwara coordinates. But also here's the last note. We're not here to get into the intricacies of Ishwara 2, of Maya. We're here to understand I am not that. That's an important distinction. Because most schools deal with what? They just deal with how things work on earth. How does karma work? How does rebirth work? We're not interested in any of that. That's all mithya. We're interested in the self, consciousness. That which pervades all, that which mithya is dependent on, but I, consciousness, am not dependent on it. So that means what? The world depends on you. You don't depend on the world. When I say you, I'm talking about consciousness. So then what's the point of trying to put our attention and energy into understanding the intricacies of mithya and maya? Birth, rebirth, how Ishwara puts me here, why does that? It's pointless. That's why mithya continues for so long, because we're so fascinated by this show. So my job is just to bring us back to the highest, which is consciousness. And ironically, there is no highest. I'm just saying it from a point of view of linguistics, because everything is consciousness. But from a stage of discriminating, Vedanta's job is to always draw us back to the non-experiencing, witnessing consciousness. Okay, let's close. I'll do... 3, 2, 1. Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti.